My sister-in-law slapped me in front of everyone at the party because I accidentally pushed her, but my husband took her side, and now he's surprised about the divorce. The evening had all the makings of a perfect family gathering. My husband, Ree, and I arrived at my mother-in-law's house just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the neighborhood. Ree was excited, smiling as he greeted his family with warm hugs and laughter. I tried to mirror his enthusiasm, though my stomach twisted in quiet unease. Tonight, I promised myself, would be different, a chance to strengthen my relationship with his family and create a pleasant memory. As we stepped inside, the house radiated warmth and cheer. The smell of my mother-in-law's signature roast wafted through the air, mingling with the faint aroma of cinnamon candles. Family members were scattered across the spacious living room, chatting and sipping wine. My sister-in-law stood in the center of it all, commanding attention as she always did. She was dressed impeccably, as though she had walked off the pages of a luxury fashion magazine. Her flowing designer gown shimmered under the soft light, and her makeup was flawless, accentuating her sharp features. She greeted us with a polite, tight-lipped smile, her eyes briefly scanning me from head to toe. I couldn't tell if it was approval or judgment. Either way, I forced a smile in return. Dinner was served not long after we arrived, and the long dining table was set with my mother-in-law's best china and crystal glasses, each place perfectly arranged. She loved playing the role of the gracious hostess, bustling back and forth to ensure everyone was comfortable. The family laughed and chatted over the meal, the clinking of glasses and the aroma of the feast creating a cozy, festive atmosphere. I found myself relaxing slightly, allowing myself to believe that tonight might actually go smoothly. After dinner, the energy in the house grew livelier. Someone put on music, and a few of the adults began to sway and dance in the living room. Glasses were refilled, laughter grew louder, and the carefree mood enveloped everyone. Ree and I joined the others, laughing as he pulled me into an impromptu dance. For a while, I felt a genuine connection to the family, caught up in the joy of the moment. Even my sister-in-law, who had spent much of dinner stealing glances at her phone, seemed to loosen up. She lingered near the edge of the room, sipping her wine and occasionally glancing toward the dance floor with an amused smirk. I caught Ree's grin as he twirled me around, his hand steady on my waist. "See," he whispered playfully. "Told you it'd be fun." I laughed, feeling my tension ease. Maybe he was right. Maybe tonight would be a rare, peaceful evening. But the cracks were always there, just beneath the surface. While the atmosphere was lively and fun, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, evaluated. My sister-in-law's gaze lingered on me a little too long whenever she thought I wasn't looking, her lips curling into that faintly amused expression she often wore. It was the kind of smile that left me wondering if I was the punchline of a joke I didn't understand. Still, I ignored it. I focused on the music, on Ree's laughter, on the fleeting sense of belonging that I desperately wanted to believe was real. As the music played on, I let myself go, spinning and swaying to the rhythm. For a moment, it felt like everything was as it should be. The family was happy, the night was bright, and I was just another part of the crowd, blending seamlessly into the joyous celebration. I had no way of knowing how quickly it would all fall apart. The night was in full swing, and the mood in the room had reached a perfect crescendo. Laughter echoed through the space. Glasses clinked together in celebratory toasts, and the faint scent of wine mixed with the lingering aroma of dinner. I had almost forgotten my unease, spinning lightly in Ree's arms as the music played. The world felt carefree, if only for a moment. Caught up in the rhythm, I barely noticed when my sister-in-law moved closer, wine glass in hand. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor, casually observing as others danced. Her elegant dress shimmered under the lights, catching the attention of anyone nearby. She was always like this, effortlessly commanding the room without even trying. I turned quickly, caught up in the beat of the music, and felt my arm brush against something. Before I could fully register what had happened, there was a sharp gasp. My heart sank as I spun around, seeing my sister-in-law staring down in horror at her dress. A deep red stain was spreading across the shimmering fabric, the unmistakable mark of spilled wine. My stomach dropped as I realized my own glass had tipped in the collision, its contents now dripping from her gown. And mine. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the music and chatter like a knife. "Are you blind? Look what you've done." The room seemed to freeze, everyone turning to stare at us. My cheeks burned as I took in the sight of her dress, now ruined by the dark stain. I immediately grabbed the napkin from my hand, my words stumbling out in a panic. "I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I didn't see you behind me." Her glare could have melted steel. "You didn't see me?" she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "How could you not see me? Do you even pay attention to what you're doing?" "I was just dancing," I stammered, my hands trembling as I tried to dab at the stain on her dress. "I didn't know you were standing so close." "Don't touch it," she snapped, jerking away from me as if my apology had only made things worse. "You've ruined it. Do you even know how much this dress costs?" I felt the weight of everyone's stares pressing down on me, my pulse racing as I tried to keep calm. "I'll pay for it to be cleaned," I said quickly. "If the stain doesn't come out, I'll replace it. I swear." Her bitter laugh echoed across the room. "Replace it?" she repeated mockingly. "You couldn't afford a single button on this dress, let alone the whole thing. Look at you. You don't even belong in a place like this." The words hit me like a slap to the face. My cheeks flushed as I glanced around, seeing the judgment in the eyes of the onlookers. No one stepped in. Not not his parents, not even the other guests. They just stood there, watching the scene unfold like it was some sort of twisted entertainment. "Please," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to?" she interrupted, her tone rising. "Do you even hear yourself? You're careless, clumsy, and you don't even have the decency to admit it. You're pathetic." Something inside me snapped. I said I was sorry. I said firmly, meeting her glare. "I've apologized. I've offered to fix it. What more do you want from me? I don't have eyes on the back of my head. How was I supposed to know you were standing right behind me?" Her jaw dropped, and for a moment I thought she might back down. But instead, her face twisted with fury. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she screamed, her voice shrill. "You're nothing. You're—" Before she could finish, her hand shot up, and the next thing I knew, her palm connected with my face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room, sharp and unforgiving. My cheek burned as I stumbled back, stunned by the sheer audacity of what had just happened. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone stared at us, their faces frozen in shock. My sister-in-law stood in front of me, her chest heaving with rage, as if daring me to respond. And I did. Before I could stop myself, my hand moved on its own, and I slapped her back. The sound was louder this time, reverberating through the air like a gunshot. She staggered slightly, her eyes wide with disbelief as she reached up to touch her now reddened cheek. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as people rushed forward, their voices blending into an unintelligible hum. My sister-in-law glared at me, her face contorted with fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I stood my ground, my hands trembling, but my voice steady. "I've already apologized," I said, "but I won't stand here and let you humiliate me. You slapped me first. You don't get to act like the victim." Before she could respond, Reese stepped between us, his hands raised as if to keep us from lunging at each other. "Everyone, calm down," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Let's just take a breath and—" "Calm down," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Your wife just attacked me. Are you seriously going to stand there and do nothing?" Ree turned to me, his face pale. "You shouldn't have slapped her back," he said softly, as if trying to reason with me. "You could have handled this better." My heart sank. "She slapped me first, Ree," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Are you seriously taking her side?" "This isn't about sides," he said quickly. "But you didn't have to make it worse." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. His words hit me harder than her slap, cutting deeper than I thought possible. As his sister launched into another tirade, blaming me for everything and demanding I pay for her dress, I realized I was completely and utterly alone. The slap echoed in my mind long after the sound had faded from the room. My cheek still burned, but the pain wasn't from her hand anymore. It was from the sheer humiliation of standing there while everyone watched, judging me silently. The room buzzed with murmurs, but no one moved to defend me. My sister-in-law stood tall, her hand still pressed to her cheek, her eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you hit me back?" she yelled, her voice sharp enough to pierce through the whispers. "Do you even know who you're messing with? You're going to pay for this. You're going to regret this." Her words hung in the air, heavy with venom. I could feel the weight of every stare on me, pressing down like 1,000 needles. My breath caught in my throat as I struggled to keep my composure. "I've apologized," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I didn't mean to spill the wine, and I didn't want things to escalate, but you slapped me first. What did you expect me to do?" She let out a bitter laugh, the sound cutting through the room like glass. "What did I expect? I expected you to know your place. You ruined my dress. Do you even know how much this costs? You couldn't even dream of affording something like this." Her words stung, but what hurt more was the silence of everyone else in the room. My husband, stood off to the side, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes darting between his sister and me like he didn't know whose side to take. My in-laws whispered to each other, but made no move to step in. The other guests either avoided eye contact or watched the scene unfold like it was a spectacle meant for their entertainment. I said, turning to him, my voice pleading. "Are you really not going to say anything?" She slapped me, and now she's standing here insulting me in front of everyone. "Are you just going to let this happen?" He looked at me, his face pale and uncertain. "This isn't about taking sides," he said finally, his voice quiet. "Let's just calm down. We could talk about this later." "Calm down?" I repeated, incredulous. She just hit me, humiliated me, and you're telling me to calm down? You're my husband, You're supposed to stand by me. My sister-in-law scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Oh, please," she said. "Don't drag into this. He knows I'm right. You've been nothing but a burden to this family since day one, and now everyone can see it." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin as I met her gaze. "I've done nothing but try to be part of this family," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor threatening to break through. "I've been kind, patient, and respectful, even when you've gone out of your way to make me feel unwelcome. But I won't stand here and let you treat me like this. I won't." Before she could respond, my mother-in-law stepped forward, her hands raised as if to mediate. "Enough," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "This has gone too far. We're supposed to be family, and this isn't how family treats each other." I let out a bitter laugh before I could stop myself. "Family? Is that what this is? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm the only one who doesn't count." "That's not true," my father-in-law interjected, his voice stern. "But you need to leave. This situation has gotten out of hand, and it's best if you go home for now." I stared at him, stunned. "You're kicking me out?" I asked, my voice cracking. "After everything that just happened, you're asking me to leave?" "This isn't about taking sides," he said, echoing Ree's earlier words. "It's about de-escalating the situation." I turned to Ree, my last shred of hope. "You're just going to let them do this? You're okay with them sending me away like this?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to his sister, who was still glaring at me with unbridled hatred. "It's just for now," he said quietly, "to let things cool down. I'll come home later, and we can talk about it." My heart broke in that moment. His words, his tone, his hesitation, it all said what he couldn't. He wasn't on my side. He never had been. Without another word, I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. The whispers of the guests followed me, mingling with the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I refused to look back. My dignity was already in tatters. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. When I got home, I waited for Ree to call, to text, to come through the door and tell me he was sorry for how everything had gone down. But hours passed, and the silence was deafening. Finally, my phone buzzed with a single message. You need to apologize to my sister. This has gone too far. That was it. No concern for how I was feeling. No acknowledgement of the slap, the insults, or the humiliation I'd endured. Just a demand for me to swallow my pride and apologize to the woman who had attacked me. I stared at the screen, a hollow ache settling in my chest. This wasn't the first time Ree had failed to stand up for me, but it was the first time I truly realized how little he cared. Over the years, I had brushed off so many moments like this, telling myself he didn't mean to let me down, that he just didn't want to cause conflict. But now it was undeniable. He wasn't on my side. He never had been. At my parents' house, I let the weight of everything sink in. This wasn't just about the slap or the ruined dress. It was about years of being treated like an outsider, years of feeling like I was fighting a losing battle to be seen and respected. For the first time, I allowed myself to think about what life would look like without Ree, without his toxic family, without the constant feeling that I was never enough. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like freedom. 2 days passed without a word from Ree. I stayed at my parents' house, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The slap, the humiliation, the judgment, it all replayed in my mind like a broken record. But what lingered most was the silence that followed. No apology, no effort to understand my side of things. Nothing but a cold, emotionless text demanding that I apologize to his sister. My chest ached with the weight of it all, but with each passing hour, my sadness began to harden into something else, clarity. On the third day, Ree finally reached out, this time with a call. I hesitated for a moment before answering, bracing myself for whatever he had to say. "We need to talk," he said, his tone curt. "I'm coming over." I barely had time to prepare before the doorbell rang. Ree stood on the porch, his expression unreadable. He stepped inside, glancing around awkwardly before settling into the living room. I sat across from him, my arms crossed, waiting for him to speak. "This has gotten out of hand," he began, his voice tight. "You need to apologize to my sister." I blinked, stunned by how matter-of-factly he said it, as if the solution to everything was so simple. "Apologize?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "Ree, she slapped me. She insulted me in front of everyone. And you expect me to apologize?" "She didn't mean to slap you," he said quickly, as if that made it better. "She was upset. Her dress was ruined. You know how much that dress meant to her." "And what about what I felt?" I shot back, my voice rising. "What about the humiliation I felt when she called me stupid, careless, and poor? What about the fact that she hit me first and you stood there and did nothing? Does that mean nothing to you?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm not saying it was right, but you made it worse by slapping her back. You escalated the situation." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Escalated? She slapped me, Ree. She called me names, humiliated me in front of everyone. And you think I'm the one who escalated it?" "It's not about what I think," he said, his voice defensive. "It's about making peace. She's my sister, and this is my family. I can't just let this feud keep going." "And what about me?" I demanded. "I'm your wife, Ree. Or does that mean nothing to you? You promised to stand by me, to protect me, but every time your family attacks me, you take their side. You've never stood up for me. Not once." "That's not fair," he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. "I've always tried to keep the peace." "No," I said firmly, leaning forward. "You've always tried to keep them happy. At my expense." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Ree finally looked up, his face a mixture of frustration and disbelief. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said finally. "This isn't worth throwing away our marriage over." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "This isn't just about the party," I said. "This is about years of being treated like an outsider, years of feeling like I'm fighting a losing battle to be seen and respected. This is about you never standing by me, no matter how badly your family treats me. I'm done, Ree. I can't do this anymore." He stared at me, his eyes widening in shock. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want a divorce," I said, the words heavy but certain. "I've tried, Ree. I've given everything I have to this marriage, but it's not enough. I can't keep sacrificing my dignity for a family that doesn't respect me and a husband who won't defend me. His face fell, and for a moment, he looked like a child who had just been told the world wasn't fair. You can't be serious, he said, his voice cracking. You're going to throw away everything we've built over one argument? This isn't about one argument, I said softly. This is about everything, and I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing myself for the first time in years. He shook his head, his frustration boiling over. You're being selfish, he said angrily. Marriage is about compromise. You should understand that. I met his gaze, my voice steady. Marriage is about partnership, Ree. And I can't be in a partnership where I'm always second to your family. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop him. Don't, I said firmly. I've made my decision. He slumped back in his seat, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. Fine, he said bitterly. If that's what you want. It is, I said, standing up. I'll pack my things and file the papers. As I walked him to the door, he turned to me one last time, his eyes searching mine. You'll regret this, he said softly. No, I replied, my voice unwavering. I won't. When the door closed behind him, I felt an odd mixture of sadness and relief. The weight of years of resentment and unspoken pain began to lift, replaced by the faintest glimmer of hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. After Ree left, the house felt quieter than it had in years. The echoes of his departure lingered, but instead of despair, I felt an unfamiliar sense of clarity. I had made my decision, and for the first time, I didn't second-guess myself. The years I had spent bending over backward to fit into his world, into his family, were finally behind me. That night, I sat down with my parents to explain everything. They listened intently, their faces a mix of sympathy and quiet anger as I recounted the events of the party and the aftermath. My father, who rarely spoke out about my marriage, finally broke his silence. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice steady but firm. It takes courage to walk away from something that isn't good for you. You deserve respect, and if Ree or his family can't give you that, then they don't deserve you. His words hit me harder than I expected, and for the first time in days, I let myself cry, not out of sadness, but out of relief. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, You'll be okay. We'll help you through this. Over the next few days, I began to put the pieces of my life back together. I contacted a lawyer to begin the divorce process and started packing up the few belongings I had at Ree's house. Each box felt like a small act of liberation, a physical reminder that I was taking back control of my life. I avoided his calls and texts, which had shifted from angry demands to desperate pleas. He sent voice messages, begging me to reconsider, promising that he would change, that things would be different. But I knew better. His words rang hollow, and I refused to be pulled back into the cycle of disappointment and neglect. His family, predictably, didn't stay silent. My sister-in-law was the first to reach out, sending me a scathing message about how I had destroyed her brother's life and broken up their family. She even threatened to sue me for the slap, claiming emotional and physical distress. I rolled my eyes at her melodrama and ignored her entirely. My mother-in-law followed shortly after, her tone more measured but no less manipulative. You're making a mistake, she wrote. Families have arguments. It doesn't mean you walk away. Think about Ree. Think about what you're doing to him. It was almost laughable. Where was this concern for family when I was being humiliated in her home? Where was her care for my feelings when her daughter was berating me in front of everyone? I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Despite their attempts to guilt me, I felt lighter with each passing day. I moved back into my parents' house temporarily, finding solace in their unwavering support. My father helped me with the legal paperwork, ensuring everything was in order, while my mother focused on making me feel cared for in the little ways. Hot tea in the morning, a warm hug before bed. It was the kind of unconditional love I had been missing for so long. As the weeks went by, I started to reflect on my marriage with clearer eyes. I saw the patterns I had ignored for years, the way Ree had always put his family's needs above mine. I remembered the countless times I had bitten my tongue, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. The way his sister's snide comments went unchecked. The way his parents' favoritism toward her was never questioned. And worst of all, the way Ree had stood by, silent, as I bore the brunt of their disrespect. But now, I was done making excuses for him. I was done diminishing myself to keep the peace. For the first time in years, I was learning to value my own happiness, my own worth. Ree tried one last time to reach me. A month after I filed for divorce, he showed up at my parents' house unannounced. I was sitting in the living room, going over some work emails, when the doorbell rang. My father answered it, and from the sound of their voices, I could tell Ree hadn't been invited in. Eventually, my father came to get me, his expression unreadable. "He's here," he said simply. "It's up to you if you want to talk to him." I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. It was time to face him one last time. When I stepped outside, Ree was pacing on the front porch, his hands shoved into his coat pockets. He looked thinner than I remembered, his face pale and drawn. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. "I just need to talk to you," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Please." "What is there to talk about, Ree?" I asked, crossing my arms. "We've already made our decisions." "I know I messed up," he said, his eyes pleading. "I should have defended you that night. I should have stood up for you. I know I let you down, but I can change. I'll do better, I promise. Just don't give up on us." His words might have swayed me once. There was a time when I would have clung to the hope that he could change, that things could get better. But not anymore. I had seen the truth too clearly, and there was no going back. "It's too late, Ree," I said, my voice steady but kind. "This isn't just about that night. This is about years of feeling like I wasn't enough, like I was always second to your family. I can't go back to that. I deserve more." He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop him. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I can't stay in a marriage where I'm not valued. This is what's best for both of us." For a moment, he just stared at me, his shoulders slumping as the weight of my words sank in. Finally, he nodded, his expression resigned. "I guess this is goodbye then," he said quietly. "Oh, I." As he walked away, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. It was the end of a chapter one had once thought would define my life, but it was also the beginning of something new, something better. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild. I threw myself into work, finding joy in the small victories and the steady rhythm of my routine. I reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the years I spent trying to please Ree's family. And most importantly, I began to rediscover myself, the person I had been before I let my marriage define me. The divorce was finalized quietly, without much fanfare. I didn't hear much from Ree after that last conversation, and his family stayed out of my life entirely. The silence was a gift, a chance to finally breathe freely. Looking back, I don't regret a single thing. Walking away from that marriage was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was also the best. It taught me that love isn't enough if it comes at the cost of your dignity. It taught me the importance of standing up for myself, even when it feels like the world is against me. And most importantly, it taught me that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. For the first time in a long time, I'm at peace. And that, I think, is the greatest victory of all. Life after the divorce felt unfamiliar at first, like stepping into a world I hadn't fully prepared for. There were moments when I wondered if I'd made the right decision, fleeting instances of doubt that crept in during quiet nights. But those moments were brief, and they grew fewer as the weeks turned into months. Each day that passed, I found myself feeling lighter, freer, and more sure of the path I had chosen. Work became a sanctuary, a place where I could focus my energy and remind myself of my own capabilities. I took on new projects, challenges that pushed me in ways I hadn't felt in years. The confidence I had lost during my marriage, the voice I had silenced to keep the peace, began to return. Slowly but surely, I started to rediscover the person I used to be. I also began to notice things I hadn't seen before. Friends I thought I had lost reached out, eager to reconnect. They told me how they had noticed the way I shrank in Ree's presence, how they had felt helpless watching me lose pieces of myself to a family that didn't value me. Their words were bittersweet, but they also reminded me of how far I had come. One evening, a close friend invited me out for dinner. It was a simple meal at a small, cozy restaurant, but it felt monumental. As we talked and laughed, I realized how long it had been since I had enjoyed something so ordinary. For years, every outing had been tied to Ree's family, their expectations, their judgment. This was different. This was mine. As time went on, I also made peace with the past. I didn't forgive Ree's family for how they had treated me, nor did I feel the need to. But I stopped letting their actions consume me. I stopped replaying the insults, the slights, the arguments in my mind. They were part of my story, but they didn't define it. Ree reached out once more, months after the divorce was finalized. His message was short, almost hesitant. He apologized for everything: his words, his actions, his inability to stand up for me when it mattered most. He said he hoped I was happy, that I had found what I was looking for. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I didn't need to. His apology was for him, not for me. I had already moved on. Looking back now, I can see the lessons in what I went through. My marriage wasn't a failure. It was a chapter, a bridge to something better. It taught me what I deserve, what I will and won't tolerate, and the strength it takes to walk away from something that no longer serves you. The life I'm building now isn't perfect, but it's mine. I'm surrounded by people who lift me up, who value me for who I am. I'm learning to trust myself again, to take risks and embrace the unknown. And most importantly, I'm happy. Truly, deeply happy. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the greatest freedom. Leaving Ree wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about choosing myself. And that, I think, is the greatest act of love I've ever shown.